Hi, Jeanette Topati with Broadcast Beat here at SMPTE Technical Conference 2017. I am here with my longtime friend, Reza Rassool from RealNetworks, CTO of RealNetworks. Hi, Reza.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
So, RealNetworks arguably invented, right, the streaming protocols, the streaming platforms.
Indeed, yes.
Talk to us a little bit about the old days and how you've moved on from there.
Well, thanks so much, Jeanette, and thanks so much, Broadcast Beat, for inviting me here to talk. So yes, RealNetworks arguably invented streaming media with the first streaming media protocol back in the days when the Earth's crust was cooling.
When we met.
When we met, yes, indeed. And what's happened since then, in those days, streaming was largely a server-side endeavor, and the clients were relatively dumb clients receiving packets of video, and a tremendous amount of the business logic happened on the server side. And now if we move to present day with HLS and MPEG Dash, we find that the server is nothing more than dumb storage that is storing different bitrate variants of the content, and all the streaming logic is on the client side. And well, what we ended up with a more scalable solution, so it can scale to millions of clients.
Okay.
But we've kind of thrown away the baby with the bathwater and lost some functionality that we should try and recover.
Okay, Reza, I'm going to stop you right there because
Okay.
there was like an alphabet soup of acronyms
I
that just got
apologize.
dumped
Right.
in there. MPEG Dash
Okay,
and
right.
HLS.
So let me back up. So let's say if you were to be watching your favorite streaming media service, whether it's a Hulu or a Netflix, if you were to measure certain characteristics of it, the stream startup time, the time it takes if you were to drag the timeline, and how quickly
For scrubbing,
does scrubbing.
Right.
Now, in the day when you and I met, those things were considered to be sacrosanct, and you were supposed to feel like you had tangible possession of the media,
Right.
that you were moving it across the magnetic head. And that's not the case now.
No.
Now you feel so disconnected from the media. You're being told, okay, you've actually requested that your movie is going to start. It'll start in its own time, and it will, if you wanted to randomly access and seek to another point in the content, you've lost that ability. So we've lost some functionality in the cause of building a scalable solution. But I feel like that pendulum that swung one way will swing somewhere to some midpoint.
So, I mean, when you said dumb clients, you're not talking about customers, right? You're talking about this,
The player.
equipment
Yes,
in the
exactly.
player, right?
Yes.
And our players now are very smart. There's so much intelligence on that receiving
Right.
machine.
The receiving machine is a computer. It's capable of running applications. It's capable of doing a whole lot more than you used to be able to do when you were just than your old VCR, for instance, used to have.
Right.
So, and part of what we're doing is utilizing that functionality and trying to construct new ways in which the consumer can enjoy and immerse themselves in the content that were not conceivable in the day of the dumb client. Yes.
So what is really new about what Real is doing right now?
So I'm a new CTO at RealNetworks. I'm about into my second year in the job. One of the first things that I thought was important to in this endeavor of bringing Real back to a new generation of consumers was to inject some of the newest technology in the industry. And one of those tools that is emerging in the industry is called machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Tell me about that.
In the day when you and I started off, we would solve problems by providing a recipe to a computer of step-by-step instructions to say, this is how you solve this problem. Mm-hmm. But there's a class of problem that we don't know what the recipe is to solve it, but we know it's soluble because we ourselves solve that problem. And one of those problems is facial recognition.
Okay.
We can look at an object or a face and we can recognize it. And so how does our brain do that? And there's a new emerging school of learning called machine learning. It's a tool set and it's a paradigm that's very different to programmatic solving of problems. And what it does, it requires a mass of data.
Right.
That's it. And you throw the data at a brain. It's basically something that's constructed very much like the human brain. Mm-hmm. And very soon this brain starts learning how to solve the problem. So in the medical case, for instance, you can show the brain, here's a biopsy of some tissue, and you tell it this was benign and this one was malignant. And you do that a few times, a few hundred times, a few thousand times, and after a while the computer says, okay, I think I've got this now. Show me one and I'll tell you whether this was benign or malignant. And so in the medical industry, that technique was put to good use. Netflix put it to good use in a recognition engine, and before you knew it, many companies were proving that machine learning can solve problems that we were not able to solve otherwise.
Well, I think back in the day, like we said, when we sent video, we sent video.
Yeah.
Now we're sending video and preferences data and device data, and there's so much data that's collected and transmitted.
Right.
And there's really piles of dark data that never even gets used or looked at. So how is this machine learning working with these piles of data to give us sensible, usable sort of truths about what's coming across?
There you go. I think you mentioned the right word. It's the truth. It's finding those data sets that you can call ground truth. And those are super valuable data sets. And it's not every small garage startup has access to those data sets. Mm-hmm. So only if...
Thank God, right?
Yeah, yes, I think so. So, I mean, the tools to wield machine learning, I think, are commoditized. TensorFlow, a great, gift that Google gave to the industry, where they collected the best tools for machine learning and published it in an open way. That's great, but that's a small part of the problem. You actually need this body of data, the ground truth. So who's sitting on it? Well, it's the companies that have big consumer platforms, that have got consumer platforms where they've amassed a lot of data. RealNetworks happens to be one of those companies. And so based on that assemblage of ground truth, we're able to construct brains that are able to make predictions or make recognition, facial recognition, object recognition. So a few, so I mean, the question is, what other problems can we solve with
Right.
machine
Well,
learning?
I was going to say, what kind of truths are you
Yeah.
able to use, and how are you using them in your player to make things
Right.
better?
Absolutely. Okay. So imagine early up in the content acquisition cycle, you even in the camera, you are recognizing faces of actors who are in the scene. You're recognizing objects that are in the scene, and so that's great. That helps with automation. That might improve the workflow in post-production.
Are we dumping some metadata in there? Because I hate typing out metadata.
Yes, automatically
Okay.
striping the metadata, but also keeping a copy of it in the cloud, and creating some way to make sure that if the metadata becomes disconnected from the content, we're able to reattach it.
Oh, that's
All
always
of-
the problem,
That's
right?
always the
It's
problem.
like one generation, maybe two.
Right.
You collected
Yes.
all this stuff, and then it's like, where
Do you remember?
is it?
In our day, everything was crammed into line 21 because we knew line 21 would never be stripped out because the closed caption was
Right,
there.
right.
Okay.
It was terrible.
But
yeah.
so now we have something similar. The equivalent of that line 21 or the vertical blanking or LTC
Right.
is now called SEI, but even that gets disconnected sometimes from the content. So imagine we've now richly labeled the content to say who's in it, what's happening. It has value in post-production, but I think the bigger value is downstream at the consumption stage. So what can you do with that? You can provide functionality much like Amazon's already providing the X-ray functionality, so that people can navigate into the content in more interesting ways of saying, where else did I see that actor? Let's go to that clip. Or what were they in before?
The questions that we used to like sit around and ask each other.
Right.
when we were watching
So what
Now
else could you do? You could maybe transform the very paradigm of the interstitial ad. Now you can recognize objects that are shoppable objects, shoppable moments in the content. And instead of funding that entertainment channel with an interstitial ad that breaks your enjoyment of the content, instead there's opportunities for you to click on hotspots.
Okay,
in
I'm
the
going to
video.
ask you
Okay.
a hard question now.
Go ahead.
Because this promise, this
Right.
technology demo has been around
I know.
in this industry as long as I have. So what makes this different?
So in the past, I think it required a heck of a lot of labor in order to tag the content, and we didn't have this sort of end-to-end approach of being able to tag the content and know that those tags are going to survive all the way to consumption. I think in the advent of OTT, OTT gives you a capability of at least ensuring that the metadata can survive all the way to the consumption. And then at the consumption stage, we have technologies like dynamic ad insertion. We've now got augmented reality that can do product placement on the fly. We've now got, as you said, the playback device is not the dumb VCR or an underpowered set-top box. It is a computer.
Right.
It's an application device that could engage you into an e-commerce or a T-commerce
But this
experience.
communication is much more of a two-way proposition now, right? I mean,
Indeed.
it used to be that we would just push the data out, and now we're collecting as much as we're
Now we're
sending.
collecting. Okay, so here's the other scary thing is, as well as analyzing the content in the entertainment stream, many television screens have now got cameras in them,
Yes, they do.
You're watching-
or microphones that are listening.
or microphones that are listening, and you now have the ability to interact with the content. and we're already seeing consumer devices that are listening to every word that you're saying, and consumers are, to some extent, accepting that in exchange for some added utility.
Well, I think we're going to see another paradigm shift. We went
Okay.
from talking to ourselves, right, with our Bluetooth headsets,
Right.
and then now we talk to devices in our homes.
Right.
But with AR, I think we're going to be, waving. It'll
gonna
be
be-
gestural now, so we'll be waving at our computer, and somebody across the room is right. So this is the new sort of level of tech crazy that we're going to have, I think.
Yes, another reason to hide your insanity. Some technology to blame it on.
So how can
Yeah.
we use this technology to improve the customer experience? How can we really
Yeah.
make things better for them?
So let's hope that it ushers an era of the demise of the interstitial commercial.
Oh, wait, right here.
Boom. Okay.
Boom. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so down with that.
What else? I mean, it might be almost sacrilegious to think of an era beyond that, of a post-advertising world. So does this technology actually usher in the disintermediation of brands and the consumers, of celebrities and their fans, where the middleman, who's this trillion-dollar industry that's sucking up the spend, it's like brands are pushing on a rope to try and get to their consumers.
Okay, so I'm going to go
okay.
way off our pre-prepared questions
Okay.
and ask you, how much do you think blockchain is going to have an effect on that?
Wow. Okay. So that, I think, is probably the other component in tandem with machine learning that is going to completely transform our industry.
Because our customers, they want transparency now, right?
Absolutely. So when I'm divulging information, I'm happy to do it to you because it's between you and me, right?
Right,
Okay,
nobody else is-
Nobody else is not. Okay. But I don't want to give it up to commercial entities, or I might do it in exchange for some value. So blockchain's really great for distributing trust, but also enabling me to decide how much of that information I want to divulge, or how much attribution that piece of information has to me, rather the other way, me giving up information. Here's a fact that is of value to a brand, but to what extent does that need to be attributed directly to me on a one-to-one basis? I think blockchain helps us
And how many
resolve
other
that.
people have they sold that information to, right?
Exactly, yes.
But I think in terms of blockchain, and forgive me, we've gone afield,
Yeah,
but
we've gone way off topic, yeah,
but-
that's good.
micropayments, when you were talking about connecting the talent
Right.
and the fans together, it seems like micropayments might be a key.
Micropayments are key, and frictionless micropayments without an onerous toll on each payment would make a lot more sense. And so you're starting to see some flexible loyalty programs where I'm consuming content, but my engagement with the content and maybe the sponsoring brands that are in the content earn me rewards, earn me some sort of virtual currency. Mm-hmm. That is redeemable. Maybe it underwrites my subscription for my entertainment service. Maybe it's so much that I can actually purchase some things with it. Maybe I should be rewarded for sharing and recommending, mm-hmm. and maybe that the subsequent engagement that trickles on from that initial share, I should participate in that. So this is how blockchain could actually usher in that type of value exchange and a more equitable sharing of the pie.
So how is RealNetworks navigating into this ecosystem?
To some extent,
to bring it back around.
Yes,
right?
to,
to the
absolutely.
guys that are paying your check.
Yes, exactly. So I have to think about that. That you know, in so there when I as a new CTO of RealNetworks walk around trade shows, and it's amazing that there's such a fondness for this brand because it's regarded as part of our history. And there's almost a nostalgia.
Sure.
Oh, RealNetworks, are they still around? What are they still doing? RealNetworks is a going concern. It's a public company. RealNetworks has been kind of the philanthropist to this industry. So what is RealNetworks doing? I think my mission is to build a product portfolio to help bring back the brand to a new generation of entertainment consumers. And so all of these things that we're talking about feed into that vision for what that would mean and how to make it relevant to a new generation of consumers.
Coming soon
at RealNetworks, yes indeed.
Well, Reza,
I'm so thrilled.
Thank you so much. This has been really a fascinating talk, and I'm not just saying that. It's been really interesting, and it's been really a pleasure.
Jeanette, it was always wonderful to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jeanette DePatie, Broadcast Beat at SMPTE Technical Conference 2017.